Michael Bloomberg is spending his Thursday campaigning in North Carolina and Texas. The former New York City mayor is focusing on the 14 states that will vote on Super Tuesday on March 3rd. He is skipping the next two contests altogether. Nevada is up next. Early voting in that caucus starts Saturday, and several candidates made visits there today. Holly Otterbein reports on the 2020 race for Politico, and she joins me now from Philadelphia. Hi, Holly. So one of those candidates is Senator Bernie Sanders, who you've been covering. He's coming off of a win in New Hampshire. What does his campaign look like in Nevada?
In Nevada, they're feeling pretty confident. They have the most staff in the state, and it's a caucus state. They've done caucuses before. It's also a state with many Latino Democrats, and they've shown some strength with Latinos. In New Hampshire, they won Latino voters. They won more Latino voters than any other candidate. So they're feeling pretty strongly right now about that state.
And so how does his campaign there then compare to the other candidates in the race?
Well, I mean, like I said, they do have more staff than anyone else right now. They did suffer a little bit of a blow recently with the Culinary Union, which, of course, is a very powerful union in that state. The Culinary Union is passing out flyers that criticize Sanders' Medicare for All plan. Interestingly, they just announced today that they are not going to endorse a candidate in the race. So while his plan is being criticized by the union on one hand, on the other hand, it's kind of a win for him that they decided not to endorse anyone. Essentially, his opponents are not rallying behind an alternative in this case. It was expected that the union would likely endorse Joe Biden, if anyone, and that's not happening.
So the Sanders campaign is not seeing it as a blow to their campaign then?
Well, I have not gotten that comment from them directly, but just looking at it myself, I think that this is one of the better case scenarios, since it was not expected that he would ever win that endorsement. The next best thing for them would probably be no endorsement, right?
Sure.
They're not rallying behind anyone specifically, who's running against him.
Sure. And Holly, Super Tuesday is just a few weeks away. That is the first time Michael Bloomberg has a real chance of picking up delegates. How is the Sanders campaign preparing for him to compete with that?
So the Sanders campaign has been focusing a lot on California. He's been visiting California for many months now. There was actually one point where he was visiting it more than anyone else. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but just shows that he really got a head start in that state. And again, they feel as though they are performing strongly among Latino voters. There's a lot of Latino voters in California. It's a liberal state. It's also a state where you need to, be on TV to play. It's not a state where you can do, the kind of field organizing that you can do in a smaller state like Iowa or New Hampshire. So he is the best fundraiser in the Democratic primary right now, other than the self-funders. But and so, he can obviously play on TV. I think that is a huge strength for him. His biggest risk, or one of the bigger risks for him, is if the moderates and his opponents do come out and get behind someone else.
Right. It seems now that the, moderate vote is being somewhat divvied up among some of the other Democratic candidates. Is he worried that at some point one of those candidates is going to be the focus of the moderate vote?
Well, I think that the campaign, they certainly wouldn't say this, but, there's no doubt that they are not upset about the fact that there are several moderates in the race splitting up that vote. Mm-hmm. If people did start to rally around someone specifically, that would start to be a problem for him. But with Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg coming out as the strongest moderates out of Iowa and New Hampshire, that in some ways is not bad for him. It would have been worse if there was a strong Joe Biden, I think, coming out of those states, right?
Right.
And then he has, strength among African-American voters. Instead, the top two that came out of it are candidates who so far have not shown that they have much traction with Black voters or Latino voters. Now, that could change. And we saw how quickly the race changed for Amy Klobuchar. She surged in New Hampshire, and I think a lot of that was because of Joe Biden's downfall and people looking for an alternative. So
right, and if Joe Biden's downfall continues, you could argue that African American vote that he's had pretty much locked up is then up for grabs.
Yeah, it could be. For one, am dying for a poll of South Carolina. We have not seen that in some time, and the same thing goes for Nevada. Joe Biden has been falling in national polls since Iowa and New Hampshire, so voters are clearly taking a look at this. And we've also seen him falling among Black voters in some of those national polls, and Mike Bloomberg actually picking up some African American voters. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. Clearly, voters are paying attention to what happened in those early states.
For sure. And finally, Holly, you reported that Sanders is endorsing Kim Foxx for the Cook County State's Attorney in Illinois. Remind us who she is. She's been in the news before recently, and why Sanders is endorsing her.
Yeah, so this, of course, is the Cook County State's Attorney, and she has been criticized nationally for her handling of the Jussie Smollett case. She's also been really celebrated by progressives who believe that she is working to transform the criminal justice system, that she has embraced alternative treatment, has not pursued prosecutions of low-level drug offenses that others have. So I think this was another attempt by Sanders to be seen as the most progressive candidate on criminal justice issues.
All right. Well, Holly Otterbein in Philadelphia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.